Afternoon, and welcome to this policy forum from the Washington Institute about Palestinian elections. Is it a sign of renewal or more of the same? Before I start, just notice if you would like to join us for our discussion, please feel free to send your questions in the Q&A function on your Zoom screen or email us at policyforum@washingtoninstitute.org. So that's policyforum, one word, at Washington Institute, also one word, .org. Today, I am actually delighted and honored to be joined by two friends and colleagues who are two of the most astute and best observers of Palestinian politics that I have come across. I will start with my colleague, Naomi Neumann. Naomi has a long and storied career in the Israel Security Agency, the Shin Bet, where she spent all of her career, ultimately becoming the head of the research department at Shin Bet. After that, she joined us at the Institute for a couple of years. Now she's back in Israel, where she's joining us from, still as an adjunct fellow with the Institute and doing her PhD as well. And joining us from Florida is Ibrahim Dalalsha. I have known Ibrahim even longer than I've known Naomi. Ibrahim used to be the senior political advisor at the U.S. Consulate General in East Jerusalem, where basically his job was to interpret Palestinian politics to American consul generals, to secretaries of state, etc. Again, a storied career in which he gained, I think he was awarded the National Service Award 3 times. Currently, Ibrahim founded the Horizon Center, a research institute looking at media and policy issues relating to the Palestinian issue. Today, we're going to focus primarily on Palestinian politics, issues surrounding both national elections and internal Fatah and Hamas elections. But before I do that, I would like us to start maybe with putting this all in context. Palestinian politics happens in a local, national, and regional context. So maybe we'll do a snapshot of where things stand right now. And frankly, it's easy to kind of assume that things are at a standstill, particularly as we look at other events in the region, the quick pace of movement on the Iran file, etc. Yet the reality, both in the West Bank and Gaza, things are not stable. And below this surface, there are a lot of concerning things bubbling. I look at the West Bank. There's a case of security instability. Just today, Hamas took responsibility for 2 terror attacks against Israeli citizens. On a daily basis, we see news of Israeli civilians committing terror attacks against Palestinians. The security situation remains very, very unstable. But the PA's, the Palestinian Authority's own situation was also quite precarious financially. Today, there was a warning from the State Department in terms of the banking relationship between the PA, Palestinian banks, and Israeli banks, something that could lead to a collapse of the Palestinian financial and banking sector, as well as the PA. And in the West and in Gaza, things are not much better. Absolutely, things are better than the war has stopped. The ceasefire is holding, though by a thread. But the reality on the ground continues to be very unstable. There are daily attacks, Israeli attacks against Hamas, in which many civilians are killed. Israel is moving more and more, gaining more and more land. And on the other side, Hamas refuses to disarm, give up its weapons. It's entrenching its control on the ground in Gaza. So I would like to turn to my colleagues to dig a bit deeper into what is the context. And maybe I will start with Naomi to talk a bit more about Gaza and where you see things in Gaza right now. Naomi, all yours. I mean, you need to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, so it has been almost 3 years since the outbreak of October 7 war, and I think we need to say something in general about the situation in the field. I can say that the Palestinian system is at one of its historic low points, It suffers from internal split between the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and from political paralysis, which is the outcome of the absence of fresh ideas, new leaders in the Palestinian Authority and the Hamas. The position of the Palestinian issue on the international and the regional agenda has been declining since the ceasefire in Gaza Strip that you mentioned. Regional actors and to some extent even US administration are now less willing to or less capable to invest efforts in moving to the second phase of Trump's 20-point plan, mainly because of the ongoing war in Iran. But I think that the real tragedy is the fact that at least since October 7, 2023, Israel has been the main initiator and the change maker regarding the Palestinian arena. And if I have to be concrete, when it comes to the West Bank, the current Israeli government has clear ideology policy. It is interested in weakening the PA and to promote the annexation on the ground. Their purpose is to make it difficult in the future for any chance of political solution in a form of two-state solution. This is the one of the things. The other things that this government also did everything in order to prevent the PA from returning to Gaza Strip and taking over. In Gaza Strip, Israel influence is even stronger. Israel sets the pace of the fighting, the amount of humanitarian aid allowed in, the condition for international actors entering to the area, and what any other players can do regarding mainly the daily life of the Gazan. So I think if the Palestinians ask themselves, what has changed over the past 3 years? I believe, and that's what I also heard from the Palestinian, their answer is everything has changed and nothing has changed. After an enormous number of deaths, unprecedented destruction, and an ongoing humanitarian crisis, they see no political dividends, no horizon, and no process moving their favor. Their daily reality has not improved compared to what was the eve of the war. Furthermore, it has dramatically worsened. So how does the reality in Gaza Strip look like? First of all, we need to talk about Hamas. Hamas emerged from the war weakened military and politically, and I think that is no longer, but I think it's already evident. Hamas is no longer capable of carrying out an attack on a scale of October 7. Hamas lost hundreds of soldiers. The chain of command is weak. The Hamas weapons are limited. And yet, whereas we can say that Hamas was not defeated, it managed to survive, and furthermore, it still has grip on the territory. In practice, Israel control about 64% of the Gaza Strip territory, while Hamas actually control less than 40%. And that's where, in this 40%, that's where the Palestinian population is compressed. So just think about the fact that 2 million people still live under the mercy of the Hamas, connected to Hamas. From their point of view, Hamas is here to stay. They're still tangled with the old system. Now, the civilian situation is extremely difficult. The population is living under destruction, unemployment, morbidity problem. The humanitarian aid is coming, and in matter of fact, it's relatively high scale. Every day, raise 500 till 600 trucks enter to Gaza Strip. It's much more than they need. But the only problem is that it's meet only the basic needs of the Gazans, and it's more the tragedy is even bigger because it's been exploited by Hamas to make money and to serve the movement and not the public. So when you ask yourself, okay, so what's about protest against Hamas? So as you know, open protest is not possible because Hamas security apparatus is still there. But there is a quite ongoing frustration, especially among the young people. According to the polls, public support for Hamas is declining, and it's about 7%. Just think about only 7% of the Gazans support Hamas. This compared to 30 to 35% that were before the war. Now you might ask yourself, so what's happened with the Trump plan for Gaza? You can say that we are actually in a state of strategic stagnation. After the implementation of phase A, there are current difficulties moving to the phase B. There are three major obstacles that are preventing progress and moving to the phase B. The main obstacle is Hamas. Hamas refused to disarm, and without demilitarization, Israel will not withdraw from Gaza Strip. The international bodies cannot enter to Gaza, and the donor countries will not fund the reconstruction. The second obstacle is there is no international funding. Donor states require security guarantee and stable governments mechanism before they invest the billions of dollars. But I must say that in the long term, Israel is also the obstacle because Israel refused to allow the Palestinian Authority to go back to Gaza. Yes, I understand it's not for the near future, but in the end of the day, we need that the Palestinian Authority will do all the needs in order to be managed to handle Hamas and to go to Gaza and take over. Now, another question is, so what is Hamas' strategy if it doesn't want to disarm itself? Hamas is using very clear strategy of buying time. Hamas knows that United States is not willing to let the process fall. Hamas believe that time works for its favor. Hamas also waiting to see what happens in the U.S.-Iran confrontation in Lebanon and also Israeli election. In the meantime, Hamas actually presents a smiling face. We, and I quoted Hamas, not exactly, but we support the plan of Trump's plan, but we, and we're even willing to give up a government, but we cannot give up our weapon. It's expose our people. These are the sentences that Hamas repeat all the time. So I'll stop here, Ghaith, and regarding what are the opportunity and what are the scenarios regarding the Gaza Strip, I will relate it in your next question.
Thank you, Neomi. We will get, as you said, to the kind of future prospects in a minute, but it's worth noting that we are at a strategic impasse when it comes to the 20-point plan. The Board of Peace is basically disempowered for all the reasons you mentioned, and the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza is nowhere to be found. So we seem to be stuck. Now, Ibrahim, to you, if you want to maybe comment on what Neomi said, but I really would like you to focus more on the situation in the West Bank, particularly whether it is the daily life of Palestinians or the sustainability and the stability of the Palestinian Authority. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ghaith. Yeah, just to highlight the point that Naomi spoke about, I think any serious plan or strategy for Gaza would need to create an alternative governance system that is viable and can actually control the situation on the ground. And anyone who knows Palestinian politics understands, I think, perfectly well that the alternative to Hamas is the Palestinian Authority. And that is, when I actually say the Palestinian Authority, many people immediately jump and say, yeah, but it needs reform, and the Palestinian Authority has weaknesses, no legitimacy, etc. These points are all valid. However, that does not actually eliminate the premise that the only viable alternative to Hamas governance is the Palestinian Authority, with all due reforms that actually need to go and must actually be implemented in parallel. I think the problem is that many plans have been drawn to Gaza. None of them did actually address the question of post-war governance in ways that would actually contain the remnants of Hamas informal system, by the way, in Gaza, because clearly many things have been destroyed. Many of the tools that they had have been destroyed. But again, with informal system that they have, they can continue to control that situation endlessly. And without a vision that actually brings in a strategy that brings in a viable partner, which is the Palestinian Authority, back into Gaza, I think many of those plans that people talk about envisioning a technocrat government that is disconnected from the Palestinian Authority would not work, has not worked. Disarmament plans for Hamas, the way it was presented, will not work. And I think primarily the Israeli government, the current Israeli government, I should say, as elections in Israel approach, they appear to be in no position to strike a deal through mediators with Hamas. At the end of the day, if Hamas emerges as the second sort of like party to that kind of deal, no matter what that deal says, this is not going to be a preferred option for the current Israeli government. Now, moving to the West Bank situation, I think you did in the introduction mention, and I would actually say the following. We have a very complex, set of emergencies in the West Bank. I think because of the level of violence that we have seen in Gaza over the past 3 years, many things have been underreported about the West Bank situation. In plain English, I would actually say the war was in part in Gaza and in part in the West Bank. The total closure that was applied on the West Bank, not only in terms of access to Israel, but also in terms of movement within the West Bank, moving from one town to town, from one village to village, is subject to iron gates. And I think all figures, including those documented by international organizations, talk about 1,000 roadblocks and gates and iron gates that have been established since then. We're talking about a level of settler violence that is systematic, organized, that has resulted in death, in property damage, in total chaos, and basically besieging, intimidating Palestinians inside their communities. This is with total impunity, or at least this is the way it appears to be, by the current Israeli government in terms of holding those settlers who attack Palestinians accountable. I think it got really to a point where even very high-profile Israeli security and military commanders have actually sounded the alarm on this issue, and it continues to be the case. The punitive measures that were also taken against the Palestinian Authority in terms of withholding, tax revenues and refusing to collect cash, Israeli shekel cash from Palestinian banks. Those two combined have actually, in my opinion, brought the Palestinian Authority to the brink, if not actually actual collapse financially. Now, making an official announcement about the financial collapse of the Palestinian Authority is not really something that the PA is entertaining for many reasons, including security implications. But we're talking about a situation where the 200,000 Palestinian employees employed and retired not received their full salaries for about full 3 years, definitely. We're talking about $6 billion, 6 billion, not million, $6 billion of tax revenues that are withheld by Israel. There were some interventions and trying to get basically this money back to the Palestinian Authority. It didn't work out because of an extreme position by the Israeli Minister of Finance, Smotrich. And we can talk about that later, but I just want to highlight the fact that the finances of the Palestinian Authority are no longer an impact on the system or the bureaucracy and the salaries of employees. It's actually impacting PA's ability to bring in medication, including for cancer patients, for dialysis patients, for primary health care, for schooling. Schools and healthcare open 1 day a week because of lack of operational budgets. And the situation have recently got into a deeper crisis where cash refunds from the Palestinian market to Israeli market, again, as I said, is blocked and has resulted in a sharp, fuel crisis, where people have been lining up, some of them for days, trying to get some gas to move around. And this all undermines the PA's governance, authority, and it could have even security implications on a longer term. The situation in the West Bank, in a nutshell, is actually as implosive as it could be. Today, there were like thousands of Israeli right-wingers who actually went into Aqsa Mosque with visible rituals, prayers on the site, which actually inflames religious sentiments and feelings and declarations by Israeli officials, including ministers, of having changed the status quo on Haram Sharif Temple Mount. And there is no need to actually highlight that point more, because that aspect of it has its own dynamics, and it could actually lead to a major security implosion, especially in not only in the West Bank, in my opinion. It could even affect many other areas. The fact that the situation, all of it, is a complex set of emergency and complexities altogether, simply went beyond sounding alarm into demanding and requiring immediate solutions. And if not, we could bear consequences. And I think everyone now concludes that maybe the coming Israeli elections would get us into a different system in Israel. Would they start thinking reasonably rather than ideologically? Because I do understand that there are certain alliances within Israel now, and ministers who hold ideologies and they want to see it through. But I think on the plausible, reasonable, strategic set of things, everything that I've said is something that is not only a Palestinian analyst relays. I think it's becoming part of Israeli public debate. So with that, I stop, because I could go on the West Bank situation, but I think this is enough.
Thank you. I mean, if I would just add to what you said, Ibrahim, in the middle of all of this also, we are not seeing any serious efforts from the Palestinian Authority to do internal reform. We've seen some small reforms, but nothing significant. Understanding, yes, some of the constraints that you mentioned, financial, etc. And by the way, we've also seen a reduction of aid, yet we do not see much of a momentum towards that. And honestly, to your last point, I mean, when I talk to officials in the region, not only Israelis and Palestinians, but Arab officials, everyone tells me, oh, we're going to have to wait until after the Israeli elections. What I heard from you and Naomi is that the situation is actually very volatile. And between now and the Israeli elections, that's an eternity. So this is something that certainly concerns me. But let's focus a bit more now on the nitty-gritty of the Palestinian politics itself. And here again, I mean, we have seen in some level maybe things that would look like dramatic changes, but there are also indications that these dramatic changes are just window dressing and not much is happening under the surface. So if I look at Hamas, as Neomi said, is weakened, but it certainly doesn't act weakened. We saw the election that elected Khalil al-Hayya as the new leader of Hamas, following Ismail Haniyeh, who was killed by the Israelis a few years ago, etc. Khalil al-Hayya is Yahya Sinwar's man. He was sent by Sinwar out of Gaza to Qatar specifically to continue his line. He's very close to Iran. Yesterday, he gave his first public address after being elected. He gave it to Al Jazeera channel, in which, interestingly, he thanked Iran. He thanked the Houthis, by the way, at the time when the Houthis were bombing Saudi oil, etc. Thanked Hezbollah and the Iran militias in Iraq. No mention of Turkey and Qatar. So we see an orientation towards Iran there. It's not only Khalil al-Hayya, we're also seeing other hardliners emerging further. By the way, when I say hardliners, to be very clear, all of the Hamas leaders are terrorists because it's a terrorist organization. But within that, we have people who are more Iran-oriented. So we will see Zahir Jabarin, who leads Hamas in the West Bank, but is based in Lebanon, and he's the main link with Hezbollah. He will be leading the negotiations. No indication that they will do any meaningful disarmament. And if I look at Fatah, we also had recent internal elections in Fatah. Rather than clarifying the question of succession, they actually complicated it further. Yes, Abbas managed to keep some of his loyalists in, but some of his critics remained, managed to score very high within this. Abbas's son is now part of Fatah Central Committee, raising a lot of questions. We heard about national elections. Abbas called for national elections in late November, done in a way that will preclude Hamas from taking part by requiring all candidates to commit to the PLO charter, which basically talks about respecting past agreements, recognizing Israel. Yet within Fatah itself, I think Abbas is not certain that he can control the movement. And there's a lot of skepticism and there's a lot of hope, yet skepticism, because people saw what happened in 2021 when Abbas called for elections and canceled them, not because of Hamas, but because he was afraid that his competitors in Fatah will come in. So maybe to, again, dig deeper into both parties' politics, what are the dynamics, what's at stake? Are we seeing just a change of personnel or a new set of ideas emerging? So I'll do the same. I'll start with you, Neomi, on
Yes.
Hamas. Go ahead.
So I will start with a general sentence, and I think it's fair to say that the political reality in both areas, the West Bank and Gaza Strip, is one of political stagnation. So, and this situation is pushing the two main actors, Hamas and Fatah, to look for ways to break out of the deadlock and generate momentum. They do this, among other things, by, holding internal election, promoting reform, and engaging with external actors in order to gain legitimacy. Now, regarding what you say, I think that is a very important thing which comes with the Hamas. So yesterday, Hamas announced that Khalil al-Khia was on Monday. Khalil al-Khia elected as a head of the political bureau. He defeated actually Khalid Mashal, that we know well, by margin of one vote. It was 35 as opposed to 34. We have to remember that Hamas holds internal election once every 4 years. These elections are conducted secretly without public transparency. Now, these elections also took place in 4 areas. It was the election for the movement institution were in Gaza Strip, in the West Bank, abroad, and even race among the prisoners. Now, there's 2 important things. Important question: why the role of Hamas political bureau chief is so significant, and what the meaning that Khalil Khia actually was elected. I think that we know well that the role of the head of the they elect him as the head of the movement for the next 4 years. He will shape actually the balance of power between Gaza leadership and the external leadership. He will also influence the organization's position toward Israel, Egypt, the Palestinian Authority, and even regarding the United States. So this comes at a time when the movement has significant challenge in Gaza Strip, abroad, and entire Palestinian arena. Now, what does it mean that Khalil Khia defeated Khalid Mashal by 1 point? You have to understand that Khalil Khia associated with hardline camp and considered to be very close to Yahya Sinwar. He is originally from Gaza Strip, and he advocated the connection to the Iranian axis. Khalid Mashal, that actually lost, he associated with Muslim Brotherhood. He represent more flexible but also riskier approach. He's willing to integrate politically into the Palestinian system in order to gain power and then to take over. He's very closely connected to Arab state. Now, the narrow victory for al-Khia mainly reflects the strategic dilemma that has accompanied Hamas since Sinwar's death, whether to continue with the pro-Iranian line or to pivot back toward the Sunni Arabs world as a Mashal advocate. I believe that it's too early to predict where the movement is headed with Khalil al-Khia. There's no doubt that Khalil al-Khia will have to deal with one of the Hamas most challenging decision, the question of disarmament of Hamas military capability and the integration into Palestinian political system. My assumption is that he will find it very hard to go in the way that actually Khalid Mashal approve. But I must say that in the last 1 year, we know him that he had a connection with the American representative over the like Witkoff and etc. And also in 2025, Al-Khia demonstrated great flexibility than the military leadership in Gaza when they talk about the ceasefire. So I think that it really depends what will happen. They will wait to see. I think that Khalil Khia won't do any dramatic change until he will see how the war with Iran will end, what will be the result of election in Israel, how the Arab state will react to all these things, and then he will understand, he will realize what he needs to do. But as like you said, Reis, we shouldn't be confused or to mislead ourselves. Khalil Khia as Khalid Mashal, both of them are not moderate. They are pragmatic. They understand that Hamas need to survive. Khalid Mashal think that in order to take over the whole Palestinian arena, it's okay to put beside the military tool and to enter or to get to this goal by election or by enter to a PLO institution. From his point of view, everything is legitimate. Khalil Khia, as part of Sinwar milieu, think that the military tool is very important and they need to keep it.
Thank you. So my bottom line, what I conclude from you, Naomi, is that Hamas continues to be split despite the elections. By the way, in terms of what, as you said, it will find it harder to, under Hayya, to get closer to Arab states. What I saw today in terms of reactions to al-Hayya's press conference yesterday from Gulf sources is a lot of anger. You're siding with Iran while we're being under fire. So he has a difficult. I will get back to the question of the U.S. engagement with Hamas, because I believe this is one of the most negative developments that we have seen in recent years, but we'll get back to that. Ibrahim, again, any reactions? But really, you know Fatah more than anyone that I know. You have good relations with everyone across the spectrum in that organization. How do you interpret the ongoing developments?
Actually, I just want to comment, if I may, on the Hamas election of Khalil Hayya, and be very brief. I think, and again, as you mentioned, like there is no question about Hamas legal political status being a terrorist organization, but that should not actually prevent us from seeing factually how this organization works. I think despite the war and despite the fact that they lost their government capabilities in Gaza, most of the military wing capabilities that they had before, they retained their informal organizational system. And that is for people who do not, who know the Palestinian situation, would simply go back to pre-2006 elections, where Hamas was not elected yet, and Hamas was not in governance yet, but still had a weight impacting Palestinian politics, being a faction with structured public support. And by public support, I mean membership of average people into the group. And as such, it actually acts as an institution. Reflection of elections of Khalil Hayya should not be a surprise. He was like basically Hamas head in Gaza. He was, even after Sinwar, he was his deputy before. He was heading Gaza. After Sinwar's death, he was the leading negotiators 2 years plus before he was elected to the political bureau. So I think you will not see any big changes in Hamas's policy, but an extension to policies that he himself have been the greater contributors, throughout the past 2.5 years. And, one thing about Hamas is that it does actually, keep its internal differences to a point where institutions eventually govern. And that is unlike the situation with my friends you mentioned in Fatah. And moving into the situation and reform you asked about and introduced. You basically covered, I think, in your introduction, many of the issues that go around reform. First of all, we did have the Fatah Congress. We had the new Fatah Central Committee elections. In my own opinion, actually, which this is a process that is distinct and at the same time intertwined with the PA reforms. Distinct because this is like a faction elections. It shouldn't really matter in terms of governance, who actually heads and who actually is a member on Central Committee of a faction. But in Palestinian reality, we have a chronic problem, a serious problem, and lack of progress in terms of dividing the National Liberation Movement, the PLO, Fatah, and the other factions from actual governance of the Palestinian Authority that was born after and as a result of the Oslo Agreement. And I think this is one of the biggest issues that reforms since 1996 have not addressed in any substantial way. We have a situation today where the people who decide on when elections will be held, how elections will be held, are not the PA government. It has nothing to do with the PA government. The PA government and ministers hear about these decisions in the news, exactly like we all do. And that is because everything is actually being done by the National Liberation Movement and its factions, including Fatah. So this is one of the issues that reform has so far did not address, in fact, even ignored. Now, I understand that this is unique and specific to a Palestinian situation that is so complex, even to explain. But, again, we're talking about essentially an appointed, self-elected system that controls governance. And in many ways, I think no matter what you do to the governance, the end result is not going to be a game changer. Meaning that people now look at the Palestinian, Israeli, and even U.S. situation and say, okay, we have 3 milestones: U.S. election, Israeli elections, U.S. elections. Those could impact policies and changes to Israeli-Palestinian conflict and even in the region and beyond. When it comes to the Palestinian elections, I'm sorry to say that those elections, even if held on time, will be a baby step in rebuilding an institution, a legislative council that we have blessed for nearly 2 decades. But don't expect major political changes because those are not done by the legislative or the PA as a structure. It's done by the PLO, the chairman. The presidential elections are not slated, and therefore, that baby step will not have a major immediate impact. It may have, and it is badly needed, and we really want to have those elections held and a legislative council, born, but don't expect a game changer as a result on November 29. Because the system is hybrid, the system is controlled by 2 different organizations, the PA and the PLO, and that is subject to a completely different, set of reforms that have not yet been addressed, not even talked about. One of the things about the current elections, and I mean to simplify, the picture, and I know that people, from afar would actually look at it and say, this is not going to produce any major changes, and I actually agree. At the same time that we are holding, PLC elections, which is the Legislative Council elections that is supposed to function as a parliament, we are holding a reconstruction of the Palestinian National Council, which is a larger part or larger organization. And I think, by time, most of that will be appointed, not actually elected, and it will be, controlled by the same leadership, and the PLC elections or the legislative elections will have minimal impact on the governance system, all of it. So that's my complex view of a complex situation when it comes to the Palestinian reform and coming elections.
Okay, so I'm gonna open it to Q&A in a few minutes, and a reminder to our audience: please ask your questions on the Q&A function on the Zoom, or an email to policyforum@washingtoninstitute.org. Now, that said, I want to conclude maybe with a very brief last round of questions. And here, I mean, look, at the Washington Institute, we don't only describe what's going on, and I, by the way, share both of your pessimism when it comes to where we are, but we also need to look forward. What are the policy options and policy solutions to move forward? And by the way, we do this because this is an issue that is not only restricted to Palestinians and Israelis. Obviously, what happens in the Palestinian arena impacts Israel, but it also impacts the region. I mean, what we saw after October 7th is that this conflict continues to have the potential to impact regional stability, not only in the near areas, Jordan, Egypt, but even further to the Gulf, etc. And it impacts American politics, American interests, rather. Are we talking about, things like Saudi-Israeli normalization, other American interests in the region? So, to conclude with this segment, maybe I'll stay with you, Ibrahim. You worked in the U.S. government for a long time. You talk to Arab officials regularly. What would be your policy recommendations today for the U.S. administration to do, and for Arab governments to do, to kind of move us away from this state? Maybe not create a breakthrough, but at least slow down the erosion and the backslide.
You mean in terms of specifically in terms of internal Palestinian renewal, political reform, and all of that?
Specifically Palestinian politics.
Actually, I wanna say the following. Yes, I did actually work with successive U.S. governments for so long, for 20 years. I'm not really clear on whether or not the current administration is actually interested, or it does really have a policy on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, all of it, leaving the Trump plan, which is focused mostly, I think, on Gaza aside. But in general terms, what I think needs to happen, mostly from a U.S. and from an Israeli perspective, I think if the approach is actually based on interest in supporting Palestinian institutional reform that eventually leads to the creation of institutions that are viable to continue with the agreements and seek further agreements, but also address internal Palestinian issues like that, focusing on institutions rather than individuals and individual leaders, I think we will be in a better shape. There is no, I think, illusion in my mind that the ones who have, with all due respect to the European Union, pressure, partnership, and work with the Palestinian Authority and renewal reforms, which in my opinion now, actually, according to what I know, is the only party that is actually getting involved in an issue like this. The American administration is not, Israelis are not so far, and the end result, I think, is a hybrid approach to political renewal that seeks survival for the current leadership. There are very good things that the current leadership is doing, which you mentioned earlier, I think, which is restricting elections to groups and individuals who would only, commit to previous agreements to the PLO national and political program. And I think this is an extremely important institutional change that should have happened in 2006 elections, which basically says that anyone, coming into these elections will have to abide by the, by the agreements, and as such preserve the institutional integrity of the elected institutions from being hijacked by armed groups. That, I think, is important, and it needs to be said, and it's being, criticized and debated on the Palestinian arena, but it's important to keep. And I think the the approach in the US, or like the policy of the US or of Israel, whether it's the current or coming administration or coming, Israeli government, needs to actually focus more on helping Palestinian and supporting the process of building Palestinian institutions that produce individual leaders committed to agreements, coexistence, and all of that. But, sitting and just picking, individuals that we like more and work with is not going to serve long-term interests of Israel or long-term interests of the U.S. And that's in a nutshell, without having to, clarify or amplify more. And I think the process, as I mentioned, of elections on 28th of November, whether the date slides or not is a minor issue, because eventually those elections will have to happen in a reasonable time frame, even if they do not are not held on 28th. I think it needs to be looked at as an opportunity of a positive step, baby step of empowering, the Legislative Council and elections-based system, checks and balances, and move and push for institutional change and reform that minimizes the role of appointed, leadership structures and factions, and moving towards, elected and legitimate elections, because this gives the Palestinian people the chance of actually have a say on who represents them and who governs them and how to control it. I mean, I don't really need to go through the whole sort of like 101 kind of, governance list of things that are missing. But it's extremely important, and the results might not be immediate. It could actually be medium term and longer term, but it would be much more stabilizing for future Israeli-Palestinian relations, affecting the region, as you said, and the international community, than actually just watching or working with individual leaders that we like and could actually deliver on short term, but not really, creating the system that would serve those interests on a much more stable and a longer term basis.
And I actually agree with you that we need to have a more structural approach rather than an individual approach, though I am more of a skeptic when it comes to the value of elections without strong institutions. But I want to move to you, Neomi, and you already started touching on this. Israel is the biggest shaper, but also one of the, after the Palestinians, one of the primary affected parties when it comes to what happens in Palestinian politics. What would you recommend Israeli policies to be? And by the way, I just want to hear maybe mention a question that I got from the audience, in that, do we expect a change in a new Israeli government? What measure of change? What are the realistic recommendations given today's Israel's not only political, but honestly traumatized national psyche? What can be done to move forward on this?
So I agree that I must start and say that I think that until we will have an election and a new government will, inshallah, will come, nothing will change, and all the actors will have to wait. I think that the very first thing that Israel government, and I think that the United States need to be there, they will need to reduce tension and prevent escalation in the West Bank, because I'm afraid that this area is going to blow up in our face. And I think that the very first month, the new government need to focus on 5 steps. First of all, to ease movement for the Palestinian in the West Bank, to remove checkpoints and to barriers in the block road, to stop Jewish extremist violence, which is very bothered the Palestinian, to hold the steps that weaken the Palestinian Authority, to reverse harmful economic measures that Ibrahim mentioned, to prevent de facto annexation, because this is what really happened, and to keep the status quo on the Mount Temple, because this can be a trigger, a real trigger. These elements will help to rehabilitate our image in the world, and may even change the trend of losing support in America. So I think this is important. From a broad perspective, we need to move forward with a large regional plan that includes normalization with Saudi. And nowadays we see all these negotiations between Saudi and United States. This is very important. I think that a new government in Israel can bring a new start, a new relationship with the Arab state and the international arena. We need, in other ways, instead of fighting over a small slice of the pie, we need to make the pie even bigger, to expand the regional framework, to bring more players, and to create new incentives that can actually move things forward. In order to get there, we need the American. The United States is the main actor that can push Israel. So I believe that new government, any government that will come, will understand these things, but we need the American to be there. Regarding the Gaza Strip, and this is very important race, Hamas, first of all, we need to move to the second phase, and I think United States need to put focus on this, to move to the second phase. United States need to be aware of two things. We cannot allow ourselves that Hamas will not disarm itself. We cannot live in a situation that we have a Hezbollah model in the Gaza Strip. And the second, that we cannot agree that Hamas will be in the politics, in the Palestinian politics, without a fact that they accept the four condition of the quartet, that the mainly is that resign from terror, no use terror, and accept all the agreement. Otherwise, it will be a problem. And eventually, you have to understand that Israel is actually emerging from a deep national trauma, and a result of most of its energy is now directed towards threats. It's undetestable, I understand that, but the trauma cannot be allowed to create paralysis. I think the upcoming election open a window for strategic reset, and the reset is very important. I think that the American need to understand that and to channel Israel into this new area. And Israel need return to our fundamental national goal, which is ensuring that we remain both Jewish and democratic state. Now, these two goals cannot be sustained if Israel continue to govern millions of Palestinians without a political horizon. This is the time, new government in Israel, it will be the time to change. I hope that we will not miss this opportunity. In order to get there, we need America near us.
Well, thank you. I mean, for what it's worth, I do believe it to be kind of, on specific recommendations from my side to the American government. First of all, we do need in this country, in Washington, in this city, to have someone in charge of the Palestinian-Israeli file. We don't have someone like this. We have, Special Envoy Witkoff, etc., but dealing with a multitude of issues, and no one's really focusing on Palestinian issues, Palestinian-Israeli relations directly. This might sound bureaucratic, but without someone owning the file in Washington, it tends to drift. That's one. Two, I would also say we need to refrain, the administration needs to refrain from further engagement with Hamas. You mentioned that, Neomi. American engagement with Hamas gives Hamas a sense that they are becoming legitimate, they're becoming mainstream, without having to meet the conditions that are set out there. This only empowers, I think, not only Hamas, but other terror organizations that see an opportunity to be mainstreamed without having to change. I would say maybe a word about some of the Arab countries. What I've seen so far when I talk to Arab officials, and that's across the board, the Gulf, Jordan, Egypt, a lot of anxiety about what's happening on the Palestinian arena, both Gaza and the West Bank, yet very little willingness to actually do something about it. The most that I hear is, look, we talk to the Palestinians, they don't listen. That's not enough. And I suspect that one of the things that we need to see, and we from Washington will need to also push our Arab friends and allies, is to become more involved. The Saudis have now taken on the mantle of the leadership on issues of reform. Well, they need to deliver. When we talk about Gaza, We also have to be very careful in terms of some of the mediators. I think here specifically Turkey and to some extent Qatar are also pushing for Hamas interests. So we need to also empower the Egyptians. We need to empower the Board of Peace. So these are all specific issues that will not resolve the conflict, but will at least stabilize the situation and could move us a bit forward. Now, I have one question I want to ask coming from the audience before we conclude. We have 5 minutes, so let's try to be a bit brief about it. Is a question that's obviously on many people's minds here in Washington, is the question of the PA payment for the families of martyrs and prisoners. And here we have basically a situation of two narratives that have left me at least baffled. The PA says that they have made the changes, they've done an audit by an independent auditor, and we see people, actually Palestinians, demonstrating against this, so it shows that something is happening. Yet what we hear from the Israeli side is, this is not real, the payments continue differently. We saw an assessment from the State Department saying that these are not real changes, yet the State Department assessment was based on open source information, etc. Now, we can spend hours saying you're right and no, you're wrong, etc. This will get us nowhere. So the question to both of you is, what can be done to actually, once and for all, settle what's happening, move beyond this? If the PA has not done enough, then push them to do more. If they have done enough, to say, okay, close this file and let's move on. This is relevant to both the US-Palestinian relations, but obviously to Israel-Palestinian relations. So I see you, Ibrahim, nodding your head, so I'm going to start with you and conclude with Neomi.
No, I just want to say in brief, I don't really think, you're right to be baffled, but basically I think it's not really a baffling situation. You have an Israeli government and by extension a US administration that does not want to deal with the I would actually say incomplete maybe, process that the PA has done in terms of reforming pay-to-slay issues. The change is real. It did actually happen. This is why you see people who are basically protesting, and even more is actually happening. I don't claim that the PA changes are perfect. There are independent auditors, and I think even the EU is doing an audit of its own. There is no interest in the current Israeli government, Minister Smotrich, to actually do an audit of his own. And by extension, the US administration, as I said, there is no clear policy towards the Israeli-Palestinian issues. So, I'm not really confused about this. I'm just saying what needs to happen. Again, I think that the only game changer that we have on the horizon, and specifically to this issue, is an Israeli government that is actually willing to look and see what actually happened versus what's not. I don't really think that the Israeli government did that, or the Israeli Ministry of Finance did that. The report is actually becoming public. It was communicated to the Congress and to the State Department, and I think they are going to come up. They did actually release the executive summary of that report, and it actually says that it's imperfect. There are certain things that need to be improved, but it's not what it used to be before. So that is basically we have some changes on the ground, but then we have like a political obstacle, big one, with the Israeli minister being so rigid about this issue. So, what we need is like more opening eyes, or like more interest in an Israeli government to look at this and try to fix the situation, versus don't even touch it, let them just collapse. This is basically, the policy of the current Israeli minister.
Naomi, I mean...
I would say, Ghaith, I did so much work about this issue, trying to figure out what is the truth, because as you said, it's a narrative issue. I think, in my view, that the Palestinians are not necessarily implementing everything fully. But more than this, behind this, I think Israel is not willing to make a shift in its approach, so has not straightened the Palestinian Authority. So the truth is in the middle. What is needed to be done? I think it's need to be done at establishment of an external oversight body on behalf of the United States that just follow the names and do check up on each name. And in this way, I think the Palestinians will agree to do this, because from their point of view, they want, that the United States will continue to support them because of Taylor force and etc. So I think the truth is in the middle. But I think if there will be a willingness from a new government, I think things can be changed.
I mean, I actually tend to agree with you, Naomi. This is one area where the U.S. can actually play a very important role. This is something that they can, as you said, work with the professionals on the Israeli and Palestinian side, the security establishment in both. We can leverage, frankly, the ongoing Palestinian-Israeli security cooperation. There's a degree of trust between these establishments. And if the U.S. comes in, providing the top cover, we can move forward. Look, I mean,
Agree too.
we can spend hours. Certainly,
I agree
Yeah,
with
we
you
can.
and with Nomi on that conclusion. Yes, definitely.
Okay, thank you again both for really at least shedding some light on one of the issues that I believe is, first of all, quite complex, and I think you helped us understand some of the basics, but something that I believe is also relevant. We might not be focusing too much in terms of U.S. policy on it, but there are certain serious risks, but also serious opportunities. Thank you. Thank you for everyone for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you, the panelists, again, and seeing our audience in future policy forums. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Phenomenal.